So before we get started, I just wanted to let you guys know here, I've gone ahead and opened up a Gumroad account, and you can come here and you can actually get the photo that I'm using in the tutorial. So if you want to get that, you can come here and you can say, I want this. I've left it at a name a fair price option, so if you want to get the photo for free, you can, although it does take me quite a bit of work to come up with and edit and film all of these tutorials. So I've set a fair price at $5, but of course any amount is helpful. So I really would appreciate any support there. And of course then you could go ahead and download this image and you can edit it with me going through the tutorial, as well as I put in the final processing parameters that I used on this image, so you could see the final results, see the final numbers I used and things like that. So I just wanted to let you guys know that that option is there. The link is in the description down below. And thank you so much. Now let's get on with the tutorial. Welcome everyone to this Rawtherapee tutorial. Today we are going to be going over how to edit portraits in Rawtherapee. Now a few notes before we get started. This doesn't cover how to shoot portraits, and a good portrait is always done in camera. Make sure that when you're shooting your portraits, you're really thinking about your subject, you're thinking about that person, what they want, if it's their portrait that they're paying for, or maybe if it's a picture that you've come up with and someone's helping you out being your model. Make sure that you're really considering all aspects. You're considering what's behind them, what's in front of them, and considering all aspects of the film, including the color that's there, because regardless of whether you shoot your photo in RAW or JPEG, whatever you have in that shot is what you have to work with, and adding or subtracting things can be really difficult. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get to editing. Now here I have a few shots. These are some portraits that I had a friend take of me, and you can see here we were kind of going for this camera in the foreground, camera in the background, and I'm going to look at these pictures a little bit closer using the inspect tool here. And this is a great tool because it allows me to see at 100% on my image to make sure that the image I choose is tack sharp, but I don't have to open the image in order to see that. So if I just come to the inspect tab here and then I just put my mouse over my picture, you can see my camera is nice and sharp, but then as I go back, I'm out of focus in this one, and of course that was intentional. And then right here you can see that I've got me in focus, although I'm slightly out of focus, but that can be fixed with a little bit of sharpening. And then this one, I'm also in focus and the camera's out of focus, but the camera's turned sideways, and I don't really like that as much. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a 1-star rating. And this picture, I'll give it a 3. And this picture, I'll give it a 5. I actually like this picture the best, but because we're talking about portraits today, I'm going to use this picture instead because it's got a face and a person. Okay, so let me double click on that to open it up, and here we go. So first thing is first, let's get some lens profile correction on there, and I'm just going to click automatically selected. Actually no, I'm going to go manual, no, automatic. I'm going to choose automatically selected, and then I'm going to rotate. So if I rotate my image, and I'm rotating because I want the subject, me, to be straight up and down in the image. All right, now that that's done, I don't think I want to crop this at all. If I do crop this, it'll be after I add something. I was thinking about adding an image here to the camera screen. Anyway, let's go ahead and open up our histogram right here. And you can see that our sky over here is overexposed. But there's also some underexposure here on the left side. So let's go ahead and increase the blacks of our image. And then I'm gonna, instead of increasing the exposure, actually if I decrease the exposure just slightly and increase the darks a little bit. Okay, so now according to Lightroom, this is a correctly exposed image, but I feel like I, as the subject, am dark. So what I'm gonna do to combat that is I'm gonna increase the lightness. And you can see if I increase it a lot, the lightness actually brings up the lightness of the whole image. And you can see as I'm increasing that lightness right here on my histogram, these graphs are being spread out across the histogram rather than sticking with where they were. So if I increase this, I keep increasing the lightness. something like that. And then I can increase the blacks again to bring more contrast. Of course, I don't want too much. All right. And then I'm going to actually increase the contrast as well. Now that that is done, let's go ahead and come down here to the shadows and highlights. And the reason I'm coming down here to do this is because this whole up here in the sky and around my head is one giant highlight. And so I'm going to increase the highlight slider here just to kind of specifically decrease the lightness, the highlights up there in the top. And let me increase the saturation as well. Now I have to be careful. You can see if I increase the saturation a lot, my skin, it has a lot of this orange reflection from these leaves. And so I actually turn orange in the scene, and you don't want that. So maybe something like that, bringing some color back in. And I'm also going to come here to my tone curve. I'm going to pull this down. So the way the tone curve works is it kind of, if you think about it as a graph of your image, so here in the bottom left-hand corner is this corner, and then all the way up here to the top right-hand corner is this corner. And so points that you put above or below this midline here will affect the image accordingly. So I can actually grab a point here and kind of pull down on it to decrease the lightness up here at the top. But then I can actually bring this back, increase what I decreased down here in the bottom of my image. So I have a nice S curve. And I prefer to use the flexible or the control cage. I feel like I get a better result with those, but you can use, and these options control your ability to control the control point. One other thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this bottom left-hand point here. And you can see if I go really far in, that actually brings in a ton of contrast, too much contrast, and I don't want that much, but I do want just a smidgen, just a hint. Now I'm still feeling that the top part of my image here is too intense. There's too much light. So I'm going to go ahead and come down to the gradient filter, and you can see when I turn that on immediately something happens. I'm going to come and open up this little widget here that gives me the ability to control where my gradient filter is put. I'm going to kind of put that somewhere about right here. And if I take the strength to 0, it's like my filter is off. So instead, I'm going to increase that just slightly. Actually, I might bring this a little further down. And I'll turn the tool off. So that will do it here for our basic image adjustments. Now let's move over into the Sharpening tab. And I'm going to turn on the Sharpening and zoom in to 100%. And let's go ahead and increase the amount quite a bit. So turn it on, turn it off. Okay, I can see it. So the amount is increased way too much. And that's mainly because I want to play with the radius here and see where a good radius for my sharpening is. And then of course there's the contrast threshold and the blur radius. So I feel like that's good. And now I can also change my threshold here with this graph. But if I turn this off, you can see the image is a little bit blurry. Turn it on, bam, really sharp. But of course the sharpening is much too extreme. So I'm going to bring that back to something maybe about 450, because then we're going to use the local contrast tool, and you can see that adds a lot to our image. I'm gonna pull back out to here, turn that off, turn it on, increase the amount just a little bit, and I like that. So again, when you're editing portraits, you are really focusing on contrast. You want contrast between your subject and your background, whatever your background is. And of course, in this photo, I have a foreground, I'm in the middle ground, and then the background. So that's what the local contrast is really great at, is it's great at giving contrast and separating. Now, I'm gonna add some noise reduction, because if you look here in my shirt, right here, you can see it's kind of noisy. And here in the shadow is pretty noisy because I've already added a ton of different edits. But one thing that I normally do is I add noise reduction last. And I do that because if I do some more color corrections that may be a little bit extreme, and I've already added noise reduction for everything before those color edits, then I'll have to go back and redo the noise reduction. So it's just a little bit of a workflow for me. For me, I like to go through my exposures tab, and then I like to go through the sharpening, except for my noise reduction. Then I hit the color tab and get my colors right, and then finally I do noise reduction to finish everything off. With that being said, let's go ahead and go to our color tab, and let's go ahead and add some vibrance. And I'm going to tick this protect skin tones. If I don't do that and I increase the vibrance a ton, you can see that I'm orange again. If I click that on, it actually protects my skin tones. Now that is a little bit frustrating because these leaves down here are about the same color as my skin. So in order to fix that, we can come here to the skin tones graph, and I can turn on, again, I'll use flexible. Okay, so now we're going to use this graph to define what is a skin tone and what is not. So let's go ahead and increase the pastel tones here to 100, and you can see the saturated tones is linked to the pastel tones. If you want to delink that, you can just untick this right here. Now let's go ahead and pull this down. You can see if I pull this all the way down, a lot of purple is added into my scene. If I pull this all the way up, it changes to yellow. So let's go ahead and get rid of that plot point, and I'm going to grab this bottom plot point here and drag that along the bottom part of the graph, and then I'm going to grab the top. Now of course I have to remember that these edits I'm making are with my vibrance at 100%. And basically what I've done is I've defined that the skin tones in regards to pink all the way here to green, very light green, yellow, yellow, green, I've gone ahead and said that only these values from this point up through here are considered skin tones. So now if I go ahead and bring this back to, let's say, something like is much better. And now if I turn that off, turn it on, the effect is quite subtle. You can see it mainly in the trees back here, but that's what I want. So now that I've added that color in, let's go ahead and open up our HSV equalizer. Oh, first let's go to our soft light and put that on, turn that on. And what that does is it just blends one picture over the other using the soft light blending mode, and I can adjust the strength, but actually 30 for me feels pretty good. And then the HSV equalizer, we will turn that on. If you don't know how to use this, that's fine. There's another video, I will link to it in the description down below. And let's go ahead and open up the saturation tab. Okay. Here we are. I want these yellows down here to be very saturated. I want these greens back here to be very saturated. So I'm going to grab my pick color tool, and then I'm going to come here and I'm going to hit Control and click in order to add a plot point. And then I'm going to come to a yellow down here and Control and click, and come to a yellow back here, Control click, and actually come to my face and Control click on that. The reason I'm doing that is because if I start editing these values and my face and skin color doesn't have its own values, then those two will be edited. So now what I can do is I can actually grab this green here and increase it. If I decrease it, you can see back here in the trees, those are desaturated. I'm going to increase this. So to add a lot of saturation there, I'm going to increase the leaves saturation, maybe not so much. Increase, actually I'm just going to take this out, and then I'm going to edit this curve so that we have a more smooth curve. I'm going to go ahead and grab this orange. You can see if I really increase it, then the orange down here at the bottom of my picture in these leaves is really increased. And I'm going to edit the curves a little bit. Actually, let me add a little bit back into this curve so it's a little more fluid. I'm going to come over here to my value, open that up, and I'm going to grab a color here on my pants. I'm going to grab a color on my shirt. I'm going to grab a color on my skin for those. And then I'm going to increase the value here for my skin. See here, or no, okay. Increase this one, lightness there, and lightness here. Now if I want to see my effect, I can go ahead and just turn this back to linear, and then bring the equalizer back on to see. And then what I'm going to do is actually decrease the lightness of the colors around. So now I'm going to grab this and bring it down, and this one, go ahead and just get rid of this here, get rid of this, Now I have really crunched a lot of colors here, which has added a lot of noise. The last thing I'm going to do is turn on my color toning, and I'm just going to add just a hint of a warm color tone, just kind of to the sky. That's where that mainly adds that. Now one thing I don't like is my skin is a little bit pink for my taste, and so if I was going to really, let's say, send this off to a client, what I might do is toss this into GIMP first and just go ahead and select my face with the lasso tool and then desaturate just a hair. All right, last but not least, let's head over to noise reduction, zoom into 1:1, and find a place that shows me where noise is really getting at it there. I'm going to leave the mode on conservative. I'm going to turn that on. And here in the luminance, let's go ahead and increase that. All right, so that is way too much. Pull it back. We don't want to kill all the noise. We still want some texture. Okay, and then let's add in some detail recovery, maybe about 20. And then let's add in a median filter with a couple of iterations. Look at my face, make sure. So this is my final product from Rawtherapee. But I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that this has given you some things to think about in regards to editing portraits. And again, just trying to accentuate certain parts of your picture using the different tools like the HSV equalizer and even just your basic exposure tab. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that this has been helpful. Please subscribe. I'm trying to get to 5,000 subscribers, so that would be helpful. And I will see you next time.